this moment, in this place, I remember who I am, letting fear and worry fall away from me. I open my eyes and see there is only love. There is only love. Love that heals, love that sets us free. There is only love. When I lose myself, when it seems I've lost my way, when I go inside and quiet my mind, I can hear Spirit gently say, there is only love. There is only love. It's a love that heals, love that sets us free. There is only love. There is only love. There is only love. Love that heals, love that sets us free. There is only love. There is only love. There is only love. There is only love. It's a love that heals, a love that sets me free. There is only love. There is only love. There is only love. Love that heals, love that sets me free. There is only love. There is only love. So good evening. I keep moving around. I'm in a different place because one of the tricky things about doing live broadcasts from home is that depending on the weather, the lighting can be not that great. And I don't have a home studio set up. So I keep moving around to try to find the best lighting. And tonight it's really gray and dark, and so I'm trying to find the best light. So, hi everybody, and I noticed that John posted a comment about the noontime Silent Unity prayer service. If you go to the Unity Facebook page, every day at noon our time, there is a Silent Unity prayer service. And I was able to lead that today. So I like doing that. I enjoy doing that. And it's funny how the pandemic has opened up some things. We traditionally have held the Silent Unity prayer service in the Silent Unity Chapel, and not that many people came. And people didn't really come from off campus. And so for years, we've tried to figure out how to get more people to the Silent Unity it's 11 o'clock on campus, prayer service. And it turns out the answer is put it on Facebook Live, and hundreds of people will join you. So lots of things are coming out of this very interesting time that we're in together. And that abundance of viewers kind of leads me to today's daily word, which, if you look at your daily word, it says it's Thursday, April 29th. It's Wednesday. So just for that clarification, my understanding is it really is Wednesday, even if the daily word says it's Thursday. So our word today is prosperity. I am grateful for my prosperity. Prosperity is not so much about a shift in outer conditions, but a shift in awareness. When I fully engage with life's abundance, appreciating the good that is already present, I am energized. As I am attracted to new life and new energy, I am primed to notice and act when even more good comes into manifestation. By giving thanks for all that has already been provided, I move into the stream of divine ideas and open myself to experience that flow. New thoughts of possibility and plenty replace old thoughts of worry and doubt. I place all of my attention on my connection with God within and give thanks for all the good that I am now experiencing. My gratitude grows as my prosperity and plenty come forth with ease. And the verse is from Proverbs. Those who are attentive to a matter will prosper, and happy are those who trust in the Lord. And if I can, I have to share with you an example of prosperity for me. And that is, if I can make the camera do this, this is a Christmas cactus that is full of blooms. And no, it's not Christmas. It's not Thursday and it's not Christmas. It is still April, Wednesday, and that little Christmas cactus full of blooms is one of my indicators of prosperity today. So our topic tonight is love one another. On Maundy Thursday, we read the passage in John in which Jesus says that he's giving the disciples a new commandment. I give you a new commandment, that you love one another. Just as I have loved you, you also should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, if you have love for one another. The hymn version of that is, they will know we are Christians by our love. By our love. I'd venture to say it might be difficult to know any disciples these days unless we narrow that directive that Jesus gave of loving one another to loving the handful of people we're quarantined with. Because otherwise, there's not just herds of people loving one another. And honestly, by Maundy Thursday, this was not a new commandment. By then, Jesus has told his disciples and his followers multiple times to love one another. He even put it in a new commandment when he responded to the challenge to name the most important commandment. Everyone thought he'd have to pick one of the top 10. Well, he says to love God with everything you've got. And then he says, love your neighbor as yourself. In Matthew's gospel, Jesus is even reported as saying that love your neighbor as yourself is like loving God with everything you've got. So loving one another is kind of hard to avoid if you are studying the teachings of Jesus. And in case we want to nitpick about who is our neighbor, Jesus also instructs us to love our enemies. Really? Really, Jesus? Love our enemies and pray for those who persecute us. Maybe Jesus is just a little too radical about this whole love one another thing. But in his defense, he gives us tools. So, okay, it's a hard directive. Love one another, love your enemies. But he gives us some tools. Don't judge and forgive. And the Gospel of Luke kind of wraps it all together and says, do not judge and you will not be judged. Do not condemn and you will not be condemned. Forgive and you will be forgiven. So here might be one of the problems with our whole ability to love one another. We can't hold on to the tools that Jesus gave us: forgiveness and not judging. Forgive? Ha! Let go of judging? Well, not right now. I'll let go of judging when things smooth out, when there's not so much to judge. It's as if the tools that Jesus has given us are white-hot steel, and we drop them the moment we touch them. I believe that we are living in the most polarized time I can recall from history, much less the part of the history that I've lived. It's easy to point to the Civil War as the most polarized time in U.S. history, but that was primarily around a single issue. Now, granted, that single issue had multiple consequences, but still, it was the issue of slavery that divided us. And through history, people were for or against the war in Vietnam. Today, there is a kaleidoscope of issues that seem to set us at opposite ends of spectrums of opinions. There are issues of racial tension and inequities of access to resources around race. There are issues of gender and sexuality and inequalities of access to resources around those issues. There are issues around immigration and who should or should not be allowed to this country and how they get in if they come at all. There are issues about law enforcement and justice, how it works or doesn't work, and we have reduced it to being for the police or against them. Many have placed protecting the environment at the opposite end of economic thriving, and then ask people to choose one or the other, as if making a living and having a place to live were not both possible at the same time. And that's part of the problem. We make everything black or white. We have lost our vision of gray. Whether you are an essential worker or a non-essential worker, you have views on opening up or not opening up the physical distancing regulations. Our judgments and our polls come with labels. I read a statement recently. Why do all liberals think Trump supporters are stupid? Wow. I can't even begin to tease out the meaning and consequence of the labels liberal, Trump supporter or not, and stupid. It feels like we have lost our ability to see individuals. We see issues that trigger us and judgments that we apply without knowing the individuals. And we see either or outcomes. We have to change. We cannot survive in this polarization and division. At the end of Keep a True Lent, Fillmore briefly goes through the 12 powers. And he says this about love. Love in divine mind is the idea of universal unity. In expression, it is the power that joins and binds together the universe and everything in it. Love is a harmonizing, constructive power. So think about that. Without love, our universe falls apart. Breathe into that for a moment. Without love, our universe falls apart. Could that be a teeny tiny motivator for us to love one another? If the consequence of not doing it is extinction. Oh, it's easy to say, don't be so dramatic. But look around. Is what is unfolding in our world dramatic? Are people discovering and still being surprised that consequences apply to them too? The concept of our connections is being played out in contagion. Ripples of destruction cross borders and economics and manifest without regard to politics or language. Familiar labels don't seem to apply. So let's begin anew. I am sort of puzzling the significance of this pandemic unfolding against the backdrop of spring in the northern hemisphere and fall in the southern hemisphere. It seems to herald both the dying of the old and the emergence of something new. It is the decay of old busyness and a quiet beginning of something, perhaps a sense of wonder. How, in the midst of all this, do we get back to love? I think we have to begin with neighbors. Whether they live down the street or they live on a street in Nairobi or Wuhan, we are all neighbors. Begin to see faces, not judgments. You know, all those people on the news, all those people on Facebook, all those people on videos, see them as human beings, not judgments about what they're doing or saying. And if faces still trigger you, see little lights of souls inside the heavy armor of humanity that we have fearfully constructed. The more we fear the world, the heavier our humanity becomes. The more layers that we put around ourselves, protecting that little flame of our divinity. Ego says that's the way to protect it. It's not really. The best way to protect our divinity is to let it shine. And inside the huffing and puffing of that humanity, that face that we don't like seeing, is a soul longing for love and freedom and a sense of wholeness, just like you. And understand that Jesus doesn't give you a way out. So even if you cling to calling them the enemy, you still have to love them. So just set down the labels. If you feel harmed or hurt or angry, forgive the errors first and then work towards a better world. We are all unskillful, that's what the Buddhists call it, in our own way. I may not be unskillful in the same area or the same way as you, but I still have my own unskillful ways. So I forgive myself for judging. And then I forgive those I have judged for their unskillful ways. Forgiving doesn't mean that we abandon the work for a world that is kind and just and generous. We just let go of the judgments and condemnations that we have about who is responsible for the world not being as completely kind as we'd like it right now. Do we have those judgments? Are there people we blame for the world not being manifest right now the way we'd like it? The world is kind and just and generous right now. We just have to look for the evidence, to lift it up and celebrate it. So, Jesus invites us to love one another. I invite us to try it now, because the universe depends on it. Love is that energy that binds the universe and everything in it together. So if we want to create something new, if we want this dying of the old to give way to something beautiful and new, let's try love. Let's try loving it into existence. So, Sunday, we're going to talk about whether or not unity is changing, and if we want it to, and how we want it to. So, I invite you to join me on Sunday morning at 10:20 back here live on Facebook. And until then, we will affirm together. The light of God surrounds us. The love of God enfolds us. The power of God protects us. The presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is. And may peace and love prevail in the hearts and minds of all beings. Till I see you again.